And what a difference this makes. Going back to the airplane metaphor, we could say that while it may be challenging to reach your destination when there's turbulent weather outside the plane, it's even more difficult when the turbulence is in the social weather inside the plane. When there's contention, bickering, fighting, complaining, and criticizing between pilots or between the pilots and the crew or control tower. Creating great social weather inside the cockpit is the focus of habits 4, 5, and 6. And what it essentially involves is helping family members learn to ask one question and make one commitment. The question is this: would you be willing to search for a solution that is better than what either of us is now proposing? The commitment is this: let me listen to you first, or help me understand. If you have the personal security and the skill and will to do these two things sincerely and consistently, you will be able to live habits 4, 5, and 6. Now, most of this process is completely within your circle of influence. Going back to the arm wrestling demonstration, notice that all it takes to change the situation is for one person to think win-win, not two, only one. This is an extremely important point because most people are willing to think win-win if others will, but all it takes is one proactive person to think it deep inside and to genuinely want a solution that is ultimately win-win. You think win-win, not win-lose or lose-win, even when and even because others do not. It also takes only one person to seek first to understand. In the arm wrestling example, this is manifested by immediately going limp and seeking first the interest of the other person. In life, it means to seek first the interest of the other, to understand the other person's needs, wants, and concerns. So both habits 4 and 5 can be done by one proactive person. But habit 6, synergize, takes two. This is the exciting adventure of creating something new with someone, and it grows out of the win-win thinking and understanding created by habits 4 and 5. The magical thing about synergy is that not only does it create new alternatives, but it is also tremendously bonding to the relationship because you create something new together. It's like what happens between parents who have created a child together. That child becomes a powerful bonding force in the relationship. It brings them together. It gives them a common bond, a common vision, a common interest, a common stewardship that transcends and subordinates other interests. Can you see how this builds the relationship, how it builds the emotional bank account? These three habits represent the essence of family, the deep inner movement from me to we. So let's take a closer look now at these habits, beginning with habit 4, think win-win. One father shared this experience in coming to understand why his son was so unhappy. Our two boys were very competitive in their relationship with each other. This resulted in frequent squabbles between the two. When the oldest was 12 and the youngest was 10, we went on a long-awaited vacation. But just when we should have been enjoying ourselves the most, the conflict between these two heated up to the point that it was affecting us all in a negative manner. I felt that the older boy was more to blame than the younger one, so I went for a walk with him so that we could talk. When confronted with my criticism of his behavior, he abruptly announced, "The thing you don't understand is that I can't stand my brother." When I asked him why, he said, "He's always saying things to me that really bug me. On this vacation, we're always around each other in the car or wherever we go, and I get so I can't stand to be near him. I wish he would buy me a bus ticket and just let me go home so I wouldn't have to see him anymore." I was shocked by the intensity of his negative feelings toward his brother. Nothing I could say had any effect in making him see things differently. We returned to the tent where we were camped. I asked my younger son to come for a walk with us. He didn't want to go when he found out his older brother was going to go along. The older one didn't want to go either, but I encouraged both boys to give it a chance. They finally agreed, so we hiked to the top of a nearby ridge where the three of us sat down and began to talk. I addressed the older boy. "You said some things about your brother. Now he is here, and I'd like you to tell him personally what you told me. He spoke right up and said, "I hate this vacation and I want to go home just to get away from you." The younger boy was hurt by these cutting words. Blinking at the sudden tears that came to his eyes, he looked down and quietly said, "Why?" His older brother was quick and certain with his answer, "Because you're always saying things that make me mad. I just don't want to be around you." The younger brother sighed. "I just do that because every time we play a game, you always win." "Well, sure I always win. I'm better than you." With that, the little boy could hardly speak. But then, from the depths of his heart, he said, "Yeah, but every time you win, I lose. And I just can't stand to lose all the time. So I say things to bug you. I don't want you to go home. I like being with you. But I just can't stand to lose all the time." These tearful words reached the heart of his older brother. The tone of his words softened as he said, "Okay, I won't go home. But will you please just stop saying and doing the stupid things that make me so mad at you?" "Okay," the younger boy replied. "And will you stop feeling that you always have to win?" That little talk saved our vacation. It didn't make things perfect, but it made them tolerable. I don't think the older boy ever forgot his little brother's words. "I just can't stand to lose all the time." I know I'll never forget my young son's words. Losing all the time, or even most of the time, can make any of us say and do stupid things that bug others and even bug ourselves. No one likes to lose, especially in close family relationships. But we typically go into situations with a win-lose mindset, and we most of the time don't even realize it. Many of us came out of homes where we were always being compared to a brother or sister. In school, we were graded on the curve, which means that if one person got an A, it was usually because someone else got a C. Our society is literally saturated with win-lose, normal distribution, schools, competitive athletics, job openings, political contests, beauty contests, and lawsuits. And all of this also gets scripted into our family life. So when we have preschool children struggling for autonomy, or teenagers struggling for identity, or siblings competing for attention, or parents trying to maintain order and discipline, or marriage partners arguing for their own way, we naturally fall into win-lose patterns of behavior. I remember one day when I returned home to my little girl's third-year birthday party and found her in the corner of the front room defiantly clutching all of her presents, unwilling to let the other children play with them. The first thing I noticed were several parents in the room witnessing this selfish display. I was embarrassed, and doubly so because at the time I was teaching university classes in human relations. And I knew, or at least felt, the expectation of these parents. The atmosphere in the room was really charged. The children were crowding around my little daughter with their hands out, asking to play with the presents they had just given, and my daughter was adamantly refusing. I said to myself, certainly I should teach my daughter to share. The value of sharing is one of the most basic things we believe in. I first tried a simple request. "Honey, would you please share with your friends the toys they have given you?" "No," she replied flatly. My second method was to use a little reasoning. "Honey, if you learn to share your toys with them when they are at your house, then when you go to their houses, they will share their toys with you." Again, the immediate reply was no. I was becoming a little more embarrassed, for it was evident I was having no influence. The third method was bribery. Very softly, I said, "Honey, if you share, I have a special surprise for you. I'll give you a piece of gum." "I don't want gum," she exploded. Now I was becoming exasperated. For my fourth attempt, I resorted to fear and threat. "Unless you share, you will be in real trouble." "I don't care," she cried. "These are mine. I don't have to share." Finally, I resorted to force. I simply grabbed some of the toys and tossed them to the other kids. I said, "Here, kids, play with these." Since our daughter's birthday party, both Sandra and I have come a long way as parents in understanding that children go through developmental stages. We now understand that expecting that kind of sharing for a child younger than 5 or 6 is not realistic, and even then, tiredness, confusion, or special issues of ownership may make it difficult. But when you're caught up in a moment like that, with all that emotion, with all that pressure, it is hard. You feel you're right. In fact, you know you're right. You're bigger, you're stronger, and it seems so much easier to go for win-lose, to have your own way. But what's the result of that choice in terms of the relationship, in terms of the emotional bank account? And what's going to happen if you keep thinking win-lose down the road? And what about a marriage? What happens when win-lose is the typical interaction? I know of one man who worked in a profession that was not interesting to his wife. She didn't like what he did or the people he worked with. They weren't her kind of people. When his work group planned a Christmas party, he hopefully, but skeptically, asked her to go. She flatly refused, saying that there was no way she would be at a party with people who engaged in activities that were repulsive to her. He attended the party alone. She won, he lost. 2 months later, her social group sponsored a lecture. A noted author was coming to speak. There would be a reception prior to the lecture. She was to be the hostess. She assumed that he would go with her. She was shocked when he told her that morning that he wasn't going to go. In an annoyed tone, she asked, "Why not?" He curtly replied, "I don't want to be around your friends any more than you wanted to be around my friends at my Christmas party." He won, she lost. She didn't speak to him that afternoon when he came home from work. She left for the reception without saying goodbye, and he went to the family room and turned on the TV to watch a football game. Now, what is the impact on the relationship and on the family when a marriage is filled with ego battles, when partners are more concerned about having their own way than in building the relationship? Does anyone ever really win? On the other hand, what happens if the typical interaction is lose-win? One woman shared this experience. "I was very successful in school, captain of the debate team, editor of the yearbook, first chair clarinet player. I always seemed to excel at whatever I decided I wanted to do. But as I went away to college, I knew that I really didn't want a career. I felt that being a wife and mother was the most important thing I could do with my life. After my freshman year of college, I married Steve, a young man I had been dating from the time I was 14. Being Miss Overachiever, I had several children in a very short period of time. I can remember feeling overwhelmed by all the tasks related to having that many young children. The most difficult part was that I had virtually no help at all from my husband. His job kept him on the road quite a bit, but even when he was home, he basically felt that it was his job to provide, and all the responsibilities for the care and upkeep of the home and children were mine. My idea had been very different. I thought we were functioning together as a unit, and while I understood that I was at home to nurture these children and to help take care of their physical needs and all that, I had thought that we would be working together as husband and wife in deciding what the course of our lives would be. But that wasn't the case at all. I can remember getting through days when I would look at the clock and think, okay, it's 9 o'clock. I can do this for the next 15 minutes and I can do it with a good attitude. I almost had to manage myself in those 15-minute increments because if I tried to look at the whole day, it just seemed overwhelming to me. My husband's expectations of me were extremely high. I was expected to be the perfect housekeeper, the perfect cook, the perfect mother. He would come home after being gone for a week, and the whole house would be immaculate, the children would be asleep, and I would offer him a piece of cherry pie I had baked. It was his favorite kind of pie. He would sit down at the table, look at it, and say, "You know, the crust is burned a little bit." I felt worthless. I thought I had failed. Regardless of what accomplishment I made, it seemed it was never good enough. There was never a pat on the back or praise, always just continual criticism and ultimately abuse. He became more and more violent. He also became involved in extramarital sex. On his business trips, he would go to places for the purpose of meeting people with whom he could have sex. I even discovered later that he had membership cards for such clubs in 8 different cities across the country. At one point, I begged him to go to counseling with me. He finally agreed, but there wasn't any real interest on his part at all. One evening when we went in, he was particularly angry. As we walked into his office and sat down, the counselor turned to my husband and said, "You seem really agitated tonight. Do you have something on your mind?" My husband said, "Yes, I'm sick and tired of having to constantly clean up after everybody." I was dying inside, thinking that I had put all that work and all that energy and years of effort into creating the perfect home. I had made all my own curtains and toss pillows and all the children's clothes. I had baked bread, kept the house very, very clean, and was caught up with the laundry and so forth. What had I missed? The counselor said to Steve, "Could you help me understand exactly what it is that you are picking up after other people?" There was a long silence, and we could feel Steve thinking. He was thinking, and finally, with a lot of passion, he blurted out, "Well, this morning when I took a shower, someone had left the cap off the shampoo bottle." I can remember feeling as though I was growing smaller and smaller as I sat there in my chair and thought, something doesn't feel right here. It just doesn't feel right. Then the counselor asked another question. "Steve, what else did you have to clean up today?" Again, the long pause. You could feel Steve thinking, and his response was, "Well, that was enough." It was right at that point, when I was feeling about 1 inch high, that I realized for the first time that no matter what I did, he would continue to criticize and see things wrong. For the first time, I began to realize that the problem was his, not mine. I went through a lot of internal struggle during those years. I spent a lot of time trying to please him and to fix me. I even went to the hospital emergency room to ask them to admit me. When they asked why I felt I needed to be admitted to the hospital, I said, "I have created an answer to my problem, and the answer frightens me." They said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "I have made a decision and purchased the equipment to shoot each of my children as they come in the door from school, and then to turn the gun on myself, because life is unbearable." At that time, I was thinking that the world was a big and wicked place anyway, and the best thing to do for them would be to take them with me. It scared the heck out of me when I realized that that was my decision. Luckily, I was lucid enough to be able to go to the hospital and say, "I have decided to do it. I have the stuff to do it, and I plan to do it, but I know it's not right. Please help me." I look back now and realize how interesting it is that I wasn't going to shoot him. It was me. It was always me. Ultimately, this woman showed tremendous proactive courage in realizing that this was her husband's problem. She ended up getting a college degree, moving her family to a new location, and building a new life without Steve. But just look at what happened as a result of all those years when her attitude was essentially lose-win, and she was codependent on a husband who was filled with the spirit of chauvinism and irresponsibility. For most people, the lose-win attitude is, "I'm a martyr. Go ahead, step on me. Have your way with me. Everyone else does." But what is the consequence of this type of attitude in a relationship? Is there any way that this pattern is going to build a rich, long-term relationship of trust and love? Really, the only long-term viable alternative is win-win. In fact, it is the essence of a beautiful family culture. Both win-lose and lose-win will ultimately result in lose-lose. If you're a parent, habitual win-lose will absolutely bankrupt the emotional bank account. You may get your way in the short run, particularly when children are little. You're bigger, you're stronger, you can get your way. But what happens when those children become teenagers? Will they be clear-thinking adolescents, empowered to make good choices on their own? Or will they be so engaged in a reactive struggle for identity, so focused on winning in the relationship, that they have no real chance to connect with their own unique gifts or with you as a genuine source of help? On the other hand, with lose-win, you may be popular in the short run because you essentially take the course of least resistance and continuously let others have their way with you. But there's no vision, no standard, no respect. And children end up reaping the consequences of myopic decisions made without the perspective of a parent's guidance and experience and decisive strength. There's no doubt that it's a long-term loss for a child who grows up without principle-based values and a relationship of respect with parents. And it's a loss for both child and parent when the relationship is based on manipulation and popularity rather than trust. And what about a marriage? What kind of impact does it have on the relationship and on the culture when marriage partners are constantly engaged in ego battles, when they're more concerned about who is right than what is right? Or what is the impact when one spouse becomes a doormat, a martyr? There's no win in it. It's a lose for everyone in the family. I've been working with this win-win habit in the context of the 7 habits now for over 20 years, and many have asked, particularly when it comes to the family, whether or not it's always applicable. It's my experience that the concept of trying to develop a win-win relationship is always applicable, but all decisions and agreements won't necessarily be win-win. Sometimes you may make an unpopular or a win-lose decision with a child because you know it's wise. You know it's not a win, for example, for a child to stay out of school, to avoid being inoculated, or to play in the street instead of the playground, even though the child may really want to. But you can explain unpopular decisions in a way that does not show disrespect to that child and that keeps your decisions from becoming withdrawals. If it's on an issue that is terribly important to the child, you may need to spend more time understanding and explaining so that that child will eventually feel the spirit of win-win, even though he or she may not like the decision, and sometimes even you, for a short season. At other times, you may choose to go for what appears to be lose-win because of time pressure, and because the issue is peripheral or secondary, and the person is central or primary. The principle is this: what is important to another person must be as important to you as the other person is to you. In other words, in your heart, you essentially say, "My love for you is so great, and our happiness is so entwined that I would not feel good if I got my way and you were unhappy, particularly when you feel so strongly about it." Now, some might say that by doing this you have given in, capitulated, or compromised, but this is not so. You have merely shifted your emotional focus from the particular issue or decision to the value of the person you love and the quality of your relationship with that person. And in doing so, what might seem to be lose-win is really a win-win. In other situations, it may be that the issue that is important to someone else is also really important to you, and so you'll need to move towards synergy, to find some transcendent purpose or value that unites you, enabling the release of creative juices to find a better way in actualizing that value or achieving that goal or purpose. But as you can see, in all of these instances, the spirit and the eventual outcome is always win-win. Win-win is really the only solid foundation for effective family interaction. It's the only pattern of thinking and interacting that builds long-term relationships of trust and unconditional love. One man shared this experience. One day, several years ago, my wife and I learned that my mother and stepfather had died in a plane crash. We were devastated. Family gathered from all over the country to attend the funeral, and afterward we sadly turned to the task of packing up all their possessions. During the packing, it became evident that some of my siblings had strong feelings about having certain things, and they did not hesitate to make them known. "Who are you to assume that you get that chest? I can't believe he thinks he is going to get that antique painting. Or look at how grabby she is, and she's an in-law. I found myself being sucked into the same spirit of criticism, and I soon realized that dividing these possessions could deeply divide the family and leave a wake of hurt and isolation. To keep that from happening, I decided to focus on things I could influence in a positive way. First, I suggested to the others that we allow ourselves some time, weeks or even months if necessary, before we attempted to decide who got what. Meanwhile, everything could be placed in storage. Second, I suggested that we all work on developing a process for dividing the things that would help draw us together as a family and strengthen our relationships, and would also enable us to have items that we either needed or would really enjoy and that would help us remember Mother and John. Everyone seemed to like the ideas and agreed. But it wasn't that simple. In the months that followed, it was easy to get sucked into thinking, hey, wait a minute, I wanted that too. But I kept coming back to the end in mind. I said, okay, what's most important here? It's the relationships. It's the outcome. So how can we do this? I just kept trying to affirm that we needed to work so that everyone would be happy. We finally put together a list of all the possessions so that everyone knew what was available. We gave a copy of the list to everyone with a little note reminding them of our end goal as a family. We said, would you please go through this list and number in order the top 5 things that you would like. As you do that, consider the other members of the family, because we want everyone to be happy. We asked all to come prepared so that if another family member was bashful about expressing a desire, they could be sensitive and plead for that family member's getting a certain thing. When the day for dividing the possessions came, I realized that despite all our good intentions, there was a high potential for quite a volatile situation. Feeling the need to reconnect with our purpose, I said, remember, we are here because we love these 2 people and we love one another. We want to come out of this experience happy. We want these next few hours to be something that would bring Mom and John happiness if they were here. And so we all agreed. We are not going to leave this place until we all feel good about what each person has. We tapped into everyone's love for both of these people and into a sense of responsibility to maintain a spirit of love and kindness and consideration toward other family members. We tapped into people's highest qualities, and the results were amazing. Each of us took a turn expressing what we had put on our list and why it was important to us. As we shared memories around these things, we found ourselves reminiscing about our experiences with Mom and John. We found ourselves laughing and joking and really enjoying sharing and being together. When we'd all had our turns, we realized that there was really very little overlap. And when 2 people expressed a desire for the same thing, one would say, gosh, that was on my list, but I can totally see why that would mean so much to you. I'd really like for you to have it. And toward the end, we felt much love for one another and love and gratitude for Mom and John and their lives. It was like an experience dedicated to their honor. Notice how this man was able to become a transition person in his family. Notice how he made the proactive choice that the welfare of this entire family was his highest priority. This man was truly thinking win-win. Most of the people in this situation had what we could call a scarcity mentality. There's only one pie, so if you get a bigger piece, then I get less. So everything has to be win-lose. But this man was able to develop an abundance mentality, the idea that there's plenty for everyone and that there is an infinite number of third alternative solutions, better ways to work things out that make a win for everyone. This abundance mentality is the spirit of family. It's the spirit of we, and this is what marriage and family are all about. There are some who would say, the hardest thing about getting married or having children is that it changes your entire lifestyle. You can no longer just focus on your own schedule, your own priorities. You have to sacrifice. You have to think about others, about meeting their needs, about what makes them happy. And this is true. A good marriage and a good family require service and sacrifice. But when you truly love another, and share a transcendent sense of purpose in creating the we, such as raising a child, then sacrifice is nothing more than giving up something small for something big. True fulfillment comes from sacrifice. It is this very shift from me to we that makes family family. As J.S. Kirtley and Edward Bach said, "He who carries a wrong heart into the married life and cherishes it in selfishness, or finds there a selfish heart that persists in remaining wrong, will make or find married life irritating, galling, unbearable." One who expects to be ministered to in the married state is acting on a principle that will pervert the whole life. He who marries for the purpose of receiving rather than bestowing makes a false start. Married life can never be what it ought to be while the husband or wife makes personal happiness the main object. 1. The spirit of wanting the best for everyone and being willing to love and sacrifice to make that happen is the true spirit of win-win. The reality is that, not in spite of, but because of their challenges, marriage and family life are the character-building crucible out of which true joy and fulfillment come. As Michael Novak has observed, marriage is an assault upon the lonely atomic ego. Marriage is a threat to the solitary individual. Marriage does impose grueling, humbling, baffling, and frustrating responsibilities. Yet if one supposes that precisely such things are the preconditions for all true liberation, marriage is not the enemy of moral development in adults. Quite the opposite. Being married and having children has impressed on my mind certain lessons for which learning I cannot help being grateful. Most are lessons of difficulty and duress. Most of what I am forced to learn about myself is not pleasant. My dignity as a human being depends perhaps more on what sort of husband and parent I am than on any professional work I am called upon to do. My bonds to them, and my wife even more, hold me back from many sorts of opportunities. And yet these do not feel like bonds. They are, I know, my liberation. They force me to be a different sort of human being, in a way in which I want and need to be forced. It is totally and sadly amazing to see beautiful marriage ceremonies take place with all the excitement, social support, beauty, and romance, and then see those marriages turn sour and end up in bitterness, in vindictiveness, in the polarization of even families and friends who were once so warm to one another, so knitted together. When you think about it, the two people haven't changed that much. What has changed is the movement from independence to interdependence, which ultimately changes all circumstances. With the coming forth of children and responsibilities, the rigors and demands of emotional, intellectual, social, and spiritual interdependence far exceed any understanding or vision the original honeymooners had. If there is continual growth on both their parts, and growth together, the increasing responsibilities and obligations will unite and bond them in profound ways. If not, it will eventually tear them apart. It's also interesting to see how there are always two sides to every breakup, and how both sides are usually convinced they are right and the other is wrong. And again, both sides generally represent individuals who are basically good and haven't really changed that much. But independent mindsets simply will not work in an interdependent relationship and environment. Marriage and family life is truly the graduate school of mortality. One man who married at the age of 30 said this: "When I first got married, I thought I was the most giving, kind, generous, outgoing, unselfish person around, and I came to realize I am one of the most selfish, egotistical, self-absorbed people around, and I'm brought up against it constantly, because the challenge is always there, doing what I know I should do versus doing what I want to do short term. I get home from work,